This is your Throwback Thursday video presentation on how to do some healthy eating and a little bit about recipe modification. My name is Jennifer Brown, and I am your Family Consumer Science Extension Agent in Person and Granville counties in North Carolina. So, there are a lot of different challenges that we face every day when it comes to eating healthy foods. But some of the main ones are fat, especially saturated and trans fat, as well as sugar and salt. Those are three of kind of the evil trifecta that we talk about when we talk about nutrition. But when you're reading nutrition labels, which is extremely important, we also want you to look out for cholesterol that is in some of the foods, especially if you have high cholesterol, either yourself or if it runs in your family. But we also want to look for the good things. So we want to look at the things, how many nutrients, vitamins, or minerals are in some of the food, especially fiber. Fiber is extremely important as we age, and we want to make sure that it is in the foods and that we're getting enough of it. So in order to modify some of your recipes, specifically for fat, the first thing that you need to do is identify the high fat ingredients. Looking at the label to see how much fat it is. Is it an unsaturated fat, which is actually good for your heart, or is it a saturated or trans fat, which are the most harmful types of fat? So there are different reasons that your food has some of these products. So ask yourself, why is it there? Is it providing flavor? My husband cooks deer meat, and it is known to be very, very lean meat, but it doesn't have a lot of flavor to it. So he will add in a little bit of pork fat sometimes when he's cooking it, so it has that flavor that you want, that juiciness, and it's not just dry and nobody wants to eat it. But knowing how much to add in there is important too. But if your recipe has certain things that make it high fat, asking yourself kind of the three questions: can I eliminate it? Can I reduce it? Or can I use a substitute? It might be that I'm preparing it slightly different. Instead of deep fat frying something, I'm baking something. So look at your cooking method as well, because we want you to lighten up your cooking. And when you do that, hopefully you are using less fat, less sugar, and less salt than is called for in your actual recipe. Whatever the amount in the recipe, we actually recommend that you use the next lowest measure on the measuring cup or, the measuring spoon. So an example might be if your recipe calls for a half of a cup, maybe use a third of a cup. Or can you use, again, a lower fat type of product, whether it's milk or cheese or something like that. And then don't forget your reductions. So in order to be able to kind of go down to the next level here, we've got this chart right here on the slide that shows how to reduce, what's the next thing down. So even if you get into the 3/4 of a cup, you're not maybe going all the way down to a half a cup. You know that there's a 2/3 of a cup. Same thing with your teaspoons or your tablespoons. Understanding the difference between, is this a pound of, a liquid measurement, or is this a pound of a dry measurement? If you have the capability, sometimes it is helpful to have a digital kitchen scale. So you can kind of weigh some of your foods and you can reduce the amount of, poundage in some of the meats or other products like that, so that you can watch your portion size. You understand truly that a portion size is about 4 to 5 ounces of a meat, but you don't know what 4 to 5 ounces is unless you actually put some meat on the digital kitchen scale to weigh it. So other suggestions that I've kind of mentioned is read your nutrition labels. Look for that saturated fat or trans fat label there. You don't want that on your products. And one of the things in order to get rid of these high fat products is to eat less processed foods, whether it's not just fast foods or eating out to eat, but things that have been processed. So eating more whole grains instead of refined grains, using less butter, using less whole milk. Can you get it down to 2 or even 1% of milk? And looking out for your cholesterol. And one of the ways to do that is to eat less animal products, or to, again, watch your portion sizes. Maybe instead of always having, ground beef or ground pork or ground chicken or something like that, can you have a fish product? Seafood is very high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are good for your heart. And then how are you cooking it? Use less salt, or use reduced sodium canned, vegetables, or get the no salt added varieties. There's just a couple of different tips to help reduce that. And we've got more suggestions on this slide here that shows ways to cut your fat, saturated fat, and your cholesterol. There are things that you can substitute, instead of using, mayonnaise or stuff like that, use instead. Use oil, such as olive oil, which is a good unsaturated fat, instead of butter or margarine. Can you cut some of the fat off of the meat products? Or when you're picking out your pack of bacon, look for the ones that have the least amount of fat on them. Cutting out salt, just getting rid of the salt shaker. Putting it up in your cabinet, not keeping it on your table, tasting your food before you salt it, using other herbs and spices to help flavor your food. There are low sodium, like soy sauces, low sodium canned vegetables, as I mentioned, that you can use. Even chicken broth, there's a lower sodium product. Can you add some flavor, maybe by adding some lemon juice or some kinds of stuff? Just simply using 2 tablespoons of Parmesan cheese instead of 1 teaspoon of salt will save over 2,000 milligrams of sodium in your diet. Ways to cut sugar. Again, buying the canned fruit or that's already packaged in 100% juice. Making sure if you are buying frozen fruit that it's not sweetened with something else, sweetened with Splenda or whatever. Can you add any vanilla or cinnamon down to give it some sweetness and to give it some flavor without having to put so much sugar? And we already mentioned taking that measuring cup and going down to the next level. Just because your recipe calls for a 3/4 of a cup or something like this, can you put in a 1/2 of a cup? Can you put in 2/3 of a cup of sugar? Just a little bit less each time can make a big difference. So we've talked about how to cut things out of your diet. We don't want you to forget that it's important to increase the good things, such as fiber. So eating more whole grains, whether you're using whole wheat flour instead of white flour, eating brown rice instead of white rice. Can you, use less meat with your products, but fill it up with more beans and other vegetables? Can you make sure when you're eating, cereal or any kind of a grain product that you're getting a whole grain? You can have homemade muffins that you've baked over the weekend and that you can even freeze and save your muffins, something you can eat for breakfast as opposed to running through the fast food and getting a biscuit on your way to work. So just a couple of suggestions. Any way to put more vegetables in your stuff, having more soups, stews, salads, casseroles, all kinds of stuff. As we get closer to the cold winter months now, I love the soups and the stews. That's good for our health. This has just been a quick presentation to remind you of some basic tips for you to be healthier in 2021 and some little tweaks on how you can modify your recipes. If you want more information or to attend any of our workshops or upcoming programs, you can check us out online at Person Granville FCS on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Or you can also email me, Jennifer Brown, with the North Carolina Cooperative Extension Service. Thanks for tuning in.